we're trending ahead of what our ADM is, so which is always a good thing. The next item that I have is the fiscal year 25 budget proposal, and that's our budget for next academic year. As you'll see tonight, this is the proposed budget, and I'll kind of take us through the steps of this and then what's next. As always, we start with our mission and vision. This is our foundation. This is our why we do our work, and what's grounded in what we do. The next slide is our why. We always want to look at what our why is, and that's our children. We're all here to serve the children of Brunswick County Public Schools. So I always like to make sure that that captures where we are. So I want to take you through a little bit of history with the budget. I felt like that would be a good place for us to start, and also to sort of dispel any of the myths about, what the board has done. And I want to put this in here, school board, just to show what you've done for employees over the last few years. So in fiscal year 19, that was right as it came on board, you all had already implemented a 2-step increase. And you'll see in the chart, I'm doing salary increases, but then employee share of the health insurance increase. So when I say employee share, meaning if there's any type of increase to the health insurance rate, how much of that is how much of that is BCPS covering for the employee, and then how much is the employee covering. So at that time, and this was all pre-Pierce Group that first year, BCPS didn't cover any of the employee share of the increase, but it was about a 10% increase to employees that year. But that next year, fiscal year 20, you all provided a 3% salary increase, plus you corrected up to 8 steps for employees. And at that time, you covered 100% of the employee share of the increase. And we've received health insurance increases each year, so the employees were paying the same amount. Fiscal year 21, recognized that was during the COVID time. There wasn't really a lot of people who had any type of increase, so we didn't do a salary increase that year. But even during that time frame, you all did provide 100% of the employee share of the increase. So you all covered that. Fiscal year 22, which was the 21-22 academic year, you did a 5% salary increase, and then you adjusted the scales for the minimum wage increases, and you covered 100% of the employee share of the increase. Fiscal year 23, which is the 22-23 academic year, you did a 5% salary increase and then adjusted the scales again for the minimum wage increase, and again covered 100% of the employee share of the health insurance increase. So fiscal year 24, which is the academic year that we're in now, you did a 7% salary increase in totality. It was the 5% at the beginning of the year, and then the 2% that came in that actually just showed up in the employees' January paycheck. And then I know that this was something that was hard for you all because you had always wanted to make sure that you covered 100% of the employee share of the increase. I know it was hard. It was a lot of discussion, but you did cover 50% of that. And I just want to put that out there so the history is there, and you really all should be commended for that and for that work, because oftentimes, as we all know, I think we've all worked places where your increase was your increase as the employee. So I just wanted to show the work that you all have been doing with that. The next item is bus and car fleet. So we get a lot of questions about the buses and cars, and we need new buses, and absolutely, yes, absolutely we do. But I want to kind of give the history because you've all done a lot of work there in the last few years. And there's no magic wand. You can't just do everything. But with the salary increases and the health insurance, I was like, this is another big ticket item that you all have done. So in fiscal year 18, you had purchased, and when I say lease, it's called a bus lease, but it's really a loan. But it's just the terminology they use for it. You purchased, leased 5 buses, school buses. In 2019, repowered 2 school buses, putting new engines in them. In fiscal year 20, you purchased 5 used school buses. And in 2021, you purchased 4 new minivans, a new work truck, a tractor, a new work van. Fiscal year 22, purchased 10 new school buses, 4 new cars, 2 new minivans, and went back and added air conditioning units to the 5 buses that were purchased in fiscal year 18. Fiscal year 23, you purchased and leased 4 new school buses. Fiscal year 24, where we are now, 1 new school bus and 1 used minivan. So future costs that are built into this budget: a new bus, a new car, a new minivan, new work truck. You know, when you start looking at best practices saying replace buses within, every 15 years, and we do have some buses, we still have 20 buses that are over 15 years old. But I wanted you to see the progress that you've made in a very short time with getting, even going back to retrofit the AC and those other buses, and then purchasing these buses and vehicles. So my proposal would be, I'd love to say we get 5 new buses every year, but at least at a minimum, 1 new bus every year to just keep a steady rotation. And then once this new lease alone drops off, then continuing that process so that we can keep our fleet up to date. But I just wanted to show you all what you've done so far.
Thank you.
So my next slide is just to kind of show, because I get questions of, well, we've had carryover money in the past, what's going on? What happened to it? Well, the last 2 fiscal years, we haven't received all of our funding. So, and I'll explain more when we get to the calculation tool. So there's a funding that's called at-risk add-on, and it goes to school divisions that where you have large population of students that are deemed at risk. So with that, with the funding, it's a categorical option, so it's not something that's necessarily required, but it is something that we really need. So when you look at the totals there, and I wanted to just kind of point out, we haven't received the full match. We haven't received the match from the county for the at-risk funding for the last 2 fiscal years. So I want to look at that when we get a lot of questions of where's this extra money, where's extra money? There really isn't any extra at this point. You see for fiscal year 23, we left $2.9 million on the table as a whole, and that's the local portion that we didn't receive plus the state portion that was there. Fiscal year 24, which is this current fiscal year, it's leaving, we left $3 million on the table, and that's a lot of money that we need. Our greatest need is children and making sure that we have staffing and programs and supports in place to fund our children. So I wanted you to be able to see this, because as we go through with the budget, I think sometimes people look at numbers and they have this sticker shock and like, oh, that's such a big amount. But when you're talking about operating an entire organization and making sure that we have staff in place and that we're paying staff appropriately and we're getting resources to kids that we need, this is a large chunk of money for us to leave on the table. That's, almost close to $6 million in 2 years. Okay. And so if we don't get the match this year, then we're leaving another $3.7 million on the table for this fiscal year. So at that point, you're talking about 3 years, it could be $9 million that wasn't here to serve our kids. So I want to take you to our budget priorities. I want to give you some history and let you know where we are, but our budget priorities. Instructional support continuation. We have, we want to continue with the services that our reading intervention teachers provide, our instructional coaches provide. You'll see by the data we still have some struggles, but we've made such great gains. And I was talking with somebody earlier today that was like, well, do you care more about systems or people? And I said, both. I said, you got to have programs and systems, but you got to have people. You got to have hands that are there wrapping their hands around kids and making sure that those students get what they need. You can have all the best programs, but I'd rather have the best people in place. I grow your own program continuation. I should have showed the video tonight because Marissa is in the video. I did a little video for the you remember when I interviewed you. So, but I'll show you all next month. I have to send it to you. But we did a spotlight video for the students, for the 3 counselors who are in the Grow Your Own program. So we were able to apply for 2 DOE grants, Virginia Department of Education grants, that have been funding them to take coursework, and as well as some people who are here locally that want to teach, and we're able to do tuition reimbursement. So we've been doing a lot of that, and when that grant runs out, I don't want that opportunity to run out. So that is part of the budget. Transportation needs, like I just expressed, security needs. I know, just for example, the high school had expressed wanting another Evolve system because of having 2 different buildings. It would be beneficial to have the Evolve system at both buildings. Virginia Literacy Act, we are required to, and this is beyond the reading intervention teachers, we're required to hire a minimum of 2 reading specialists, and it has to be paid from local funds. So we can't use federal or any other fund, so this is a part of the budget. Technology infrastructure, I know technology team is working on, I think it was routers and wiring and all of the needs to make sure that our technology continues to run and continue to improve. And then we did put in 2% salary increase for staff in the budget proposal. So I wanted to make connections to our strategic plan, and as we go through, the goals aren't written in order on here because I pulled the goals from the strategic plan that aligned with the budget. So if it was a goal that didn't align with the budget, I didn't put it into the presentation. So if you look here, the goal 1, academic excellence, looking at multiple pathways, delivery formats of student success. And so objectives were providing reading intervention services, reducing the achievement gap for all students, improving on reading diagnosis, performance on SOLs, and that alignment is instructional support continuation, keeping those people that we need in place, and then the Virginia Literacy Act, those reading specialists. The next goal was goal 3, premier workforce, and recruit, hire, and invest in high-quality employees and ensure that we retain an excellent workforce. And that budget alignment was the Grow Your Own program continuation and the salary increases for staff. The next goal, operational excellence, finance operations, resource stewardship, and aligning our resources in order to be accountable and transparent to the community regarding resources entrusted by us. And objectives, maintain, upgrade technology infrastructure, equipment to accommodate efficient and effective teaching, learning, and business operations. So that's our technology infrastructure priorities, transportation, and security priorities. So I want to take you through a little bit of the data. And if you remember, pre-pandemic, I just always remember having that meeting, and then the next thing I know, the pandemic hit. But we had showed data that supported that, students grades 1 through 12, about 70% were at basic or below basic proficiency for reading. So at that point, we put, we had already put reading plans, everything in place. The pandemic hit, and with students being home and you don't have that regular contact with the teachers, that just further exacerbated some of our reading issues. Well, you'll see we really have been making gains the last few years with having the reading interventionists in place and the instructional coaches in place. So I just want to show you the data and how, while we may have more work to do, because honestly, it's life. We're always going to have more work to do. We're working with kids, we're working with people. We've done so much, and I want to be able to show that and support that. So I just sort of put some of the reading percentages and math percentages and data there. And I wasn't going to read through it. You're fine. And then the percentiles for the high school. But the most telling for me, the bar graph, keep going. Okay. So the most telling for me that really paints the picture, with the reading intervention teachers, instructional coaches, our overall SOL data has improved since 2020-21. So we're in the blue. The state is in the orange. But you'll see where it went from 47 to 57 to 63. We're making gains. Yes, and it's so important. It's imperative for us to be able to keep that support in place, to continue supporting our kids so we can continue to grow. So my next slide, I want to sort of explain. I know last month I did sort of a fact sheet on average daily membership and local composite index. And so you'll see, because I think sometimes the argument is, well, your ADM has gone down. Your average daily membership, or ADM, is the amount of students that they take into account that determines how much we're going to get for our state funding. And while you may see, hey, the ADM for fiscal year 25, the budget, we built it off of 1310. One of the things that we have to look at is, just like I just said, the data, the pandemic further exacerbated the issue. So it may be less students, but they're students with more needs, and they're greater needs. And we wouldn't qualify for the at-risk funding if we weren't in need. So I want to put that out there because I'm fully transparent. Yeah, that's our ADM, but it doesn't mean that our students don't have needs. Local composite index, that determines your school division's ability to pay. And when you start looking at that, that looks at your locality's ability to pay, actually. So you look at Brunswick County as a whole. So that is increased. So it's basically saying we should be able to, as a locality, cover 43% of the total cost of funding school for our students. And as that number continues to grow, the state gives us less money and more the ownership is on the locality. So I'll take you to the next slide. I mentioned last month the calculation tool. This is literally derived from the Virginia Department of Education. This is their tool. So anybody can go to the site, you can go on the link to the DOE, you can put in Brunswick, you can select our ADM. So when you look at this, you'll see Brunswick County, you see that, you see the first two columns, it's for fiscal year 25. We put in our ADM of 1310 for both. You see our composite index of 0.4379. And to put some perspective to that, our composite index is higher, meaning our ability to pay is greater than some of our neighbors. So it's greater than Greensville, it's greater than Mecklenburg, it's greater than Lunenburg when you start looking at the whole region. And so that's hard. That's hard. It is heartening because you'll look and you'll say, okay, Mecklenburg has all this business and industry, but their composite index is less than ours, which means this, they get more state funding. So I always want to put that out there because that's, I think sometimes we look and we think, oh, well, that number doesn't seem high. 0.43 is very high for really anybody in Southside Virginia. So if you look through this, and I'm not going to read every number, but it shows how much we get for basic aid. So for example, that first line that's in blue says basic aid. The state gives us $7.4 million, and then the local share of that, meaning the county, would give us $5.8 million. So when I say that something has to have a match, any of these numbers that there's a number beside it for the local share, that's considered a local match. Some local matches are required, like these on this page, these are required. But then when you go to the next page of this, when you go to the next page of this, you'll see at-risk funding. That's an incentive program. So that is not required for us to have the match, but it is very necessary for us to have it to function. So you'll see where it's split. And you can't accept, if you accept at risk, and I'll show you it's in two different places, you can't accept one and not the other, or you can't decline, it has to be both. So you either accept all of it or you get none of it. So you'll see that there. You see the funds that we get for Virginia Preschool Initiative, where the state gives us $196,000 and locality gives us $152,000. You see there where it says math, reading, instructional specialist, 0. So that's going to have to come from the locality. And you kind of go through there. VPSA, that's technology funds there. So if you just go to the next page, you'll see the other part of the at-risk funding, where with that piece, $966,000 from the state, but we would have to have a match of $753,000 from the locality. So that's there. Not to read through every single number, but I want you to be able to see this. So when you go to that bottom line, the state is going to give us $16.3 million. The local share requirement is $10.3 million. So we're currently getting about $8 million. And we'll go through those numbers as we continue. So if you look at the next, our projected revenue, and that's the money that we bring in, local and miscellaneous is about $57,500. Our state funding, you saw $16.3 million. Federal funding, $1.9 million. Our current county contribution is a little over $8 million. Our total projected revenue is $26.4 million, and the local match increase would be $2.2 million for us to, and this doesn't include the child nutrition budget because they're self-sustaining and they can maintain their entire budget, and they pay their employees throughout that budget. So you would see an increase of $2.2 million. Of course, we put it in different forms for you. So, of course, you see bar graph. Everybody likes it in a different way, so I want to make sure that you have different visual representations of where we stand as far as what we get from the projected revenue from the state, county. You see that I still put ESSERs. Although that runs out in September 2024, we recognize that some of that is already earmarked for school projects. So in the event that we still need to spend some in July or a little bit later, we just wanted to make sure that was in there. Of course, pie chart, same information. Projected expenditures, as always, expenditures match the revenues. The bulk of that money from that budget goes into instruction. 18.9 million goes into the instructional budget, and then you see admin, transportation, operations and maintenance, technology, and then your debt service. Several charts to kind of give the same vantage point so that you can see what it looks like. And as you can see, even when you go to the pie chart, the bulk of what we do is instruction. So you look, we put the full categorical proposed budget revenues. And I apologize if something this is repetitive, but I want to keep saying it so that we make sure that we all have a good idea. So you see the fiscal year 24 approved budget. That's the budget that we're currently in. And then you see our proposed budget revenues there. And that's the federal, the ESSERs, carryovers, and state construction money. And you realize that runs out this year as well. Next slide, same thing with expenditures. As always, the two match up there. And you see the food service, child nutrition budget, but again, that is their individual budget. So I know I said a mouthful, but I really want to talk about what happens next and then any questions that you all have. So tonight, presenting the budget, proposed budget for the first time to everyone, had a chance to work with the Finance Committee. But on February 26th, that's the public hearing on the budget. So we do invite people out to come and make comment, suggestions. We're definitely always open. I will say that caveat, we don't hold the purse strings. So definitely whatever suggestions you give here, if you're saying, hey, well, we need a 5% salary increase, fantastic. But you still have to share that information with us, but you still have to share it with the Board of Supervisors, because we make decisions based on the money that we receive. School board votes on the superintendent's proposed budget on March 11th at the regular board meeting. If approved, the proposed budget is then sent to the Brunswick County Finance Department. There's a joint meeting between the Board of Supervisors and our school board here on March 21st, 2024, and that meeting is going to be held at the county office, correct, at the county government office. And then based on, we'll put it out there, because I'm doing this, but based on the timeline from the state of Virginia, an approved budget is estimated to be finalized by June 30th, 2024. I put that broad date because last year we didn't get a budget passed until this fall, but the goal would be to have the budget passed before the end of June. And of course, as those dates, as I get information, I give it to you all. So that's kind of it for my presentation. I know I said a mouthful. Please let me know any questions, suggestions, open.
Statement, just real quick. Great presentation and a good job telling the whole story. I guess for me, the one thing that, and she made a good point of it, the composite index. I really don't understand why ours is so high for this county. And for me personally, not trying to be critical of our board supervisors by any means, because they have met our needs for lots of times. I've been on this board for a long time, and we need something, and lots of times they've helped us. But the point is, we are getting underfunded. It's not only costing us that, but it's costing us some matching funds. $3 million for this school system is a lot of money. Now, you take a school system up somewhere up north, $3 million is a drop in the bucket to them. And you also think about what we make or whatever. If you had 10% less of what you made in your pocket each year, to all of us in here, that would affect us some way. And that 10%, that $3 million, we just want it for our students. And that's all we're saying. Like I say, not meant to be a bashing session, but it's something we really need for the students of this county. And as public officials, We just have to present the true story, and I think Dr. Majette did a great job of presenting the true story tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions?
Very informative as well, definitely say that. Now, one question I do have in regards to budgetary priorities. We can't hear you. Hold on, sorry. One question I do have relative to budgetary priorities. Special needs students, do we have any allocation, or is that covered under instructional support for?
They get special ed federal funds for that. There's still a local portion that's already part of the budget, but then they also get federal funds as well. Yes, sir.
But also, again, awesome presentation, very informative, and I think it does paint a very clear picture of where we were and where we are now and what we need. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That's it?
That's it.
So you mentioned our local composite index and that they weren't funding. Can you tell us how many times we've not been funded to the local composite index, to the required local composite index?
So, okay, so technically they can say, hey, we funded all of the basic aid and we've done those pieces, and the categorical things are optional. But it really isn't optional when you're deemed at risk, and we're the only division in the state that turns down the at-risk funds that's deemed as at risk. So it's been 2 fiscal years. So yes, ma'am, it was last school year and this school year, and then if we don't get it for this budget, it'll be 3 years in a row.
So it'll be possibly 3 years in a row that we haven't been funded to.
Yes, ma'am, if we're not funded for next year.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
And those funds are typically used for what areas?
Ooh, everything. Remediation for students, staffing, what we've been able, I hate to say that we had to depend on the pandemic, but because we didn't get the funding, that pandemic money, those ESSERS funds, was critical in making sure that we were able to get instructional coaches. We were asking for it before the pandemic, and I think that was just the one little blessing that came out of the pandemic, was that we were able to get instructional coaches. We were able to get reading interventionists. We were able to get a school community liaison. We were able to get additional nursing staffing positions. So it was a lot that we were able to get with that if we had the at-risk funding, that would cover those things, and those are those necessary supports that our kids need.
So all-in funding as well is tied to at-risk funding. So
Yes.
about how much money is in that pot for at-risk funding? So it's not just one pot that we won't be getting of
Yes.
money. It'll also be a second pot that's generally how much money?
Yes, so thank you for that. So if we don't get, I don't know if everyone, I'm talking nonsense, but there was a pot of money, $752,000, that Governor Youngkin gave to schools this past year called the all-in funding. It was flexible one-time funding. And with that amount of money, the way that it works is that if we don't spend it all this year, divisions, and it's in the code, divisions can carry that over to the next fiscal year, which would be fantastic, right? But that's only if you certify that you get the at-risk funding. So if we don't have at-risk funding next year, if we don't get that money, then the all-in money goes back. So the state takes it back. So with ESSERS money, we're already spending ESSERS money for the learning loss and what we need to do. And then now you have this other pot of $752,000 that, for us, it would be better for us to be able to carry it over to next year. And that's been a lot of the fight. Dr. Burns and Ms. Seward speaking to legislators, I think week before last, and I think, everybody's been going out to support. But I know that they specifically went out to speak to legislators about this, because if we don't get the at-risk, then we turn over the $752,000 for the all-in funding, and that goes right back to the state. Yes, thank you for that. I forgot about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, and with the Virginia Literacy Act that's coming up, that is here and is upon us right now, so we're required to have reading specialists.
Yes, we're required to have 2 reading specialists, and they have to be paid from local money. So we can't use any of the federal or Title I funds. They have to be paid from local funds. Yes, ma'am. And that's in addition to, we still want to keep the reading interventionists at each building, because when you talk about 2 reading specialists and you still have 5 schools, that's still 1,400 students, you still have a lot of students. So we still need a reading intervention person at each school to keep those as well. Yes, ma'am.
And you showed a graph that was the state and us and where we're going. What effect have the reading specialists, if any, or interventionists had on those numbers moving in that direction? And what exactly do they do? So people will actually know what their hand in this pot is.
Oh, goodness. I will get Ms. Rogers to come up and talk about her babies, because they do a little bit, those ladies do everything. There's not one set.
So our reading intervention teachers solely specifically work with students providing reading intervention. That is their main priority. Some of them also help supervise our tutors, though, that also come in to provide tutoring. So not only are they working with students, they're helping to work with the tutors who are also helping our students. So they're hitting a large number of our students, and they're working with the students that have been identified with the greatest needs. So while their growth may not be skyrocketing, we are seeing growth. They are making growth from year to year. It just, when you're 3 or 4 years behind, it's going to take time to catch up where you need to be. The more people we have, the smaller those groups can be, the more students we can reach. So they have been critical to making sure that we are providing reading intervention. Without them, we rely on the wonderful tutors that come in and work with our students, but, you know, they are not guaranteed from year to year either, and a lot of our tutors this year are also paid out of ESSER funds. So when we go back to only having Title I funds, there's not a lot of extra money in the Title I once we pay for our Title I teachers to be able to provide a lot of extra support. So they've been critical. We definitely need to continue with them moving forward, please. Y'all gonna make me cry if I start talking about them. These ladies do it all. Let me tell you, I could not do my job without them. I'm just gonna be point blank. They are in these schools every single day. They are touching the lives of students and teachers, and they provide so much support to our teachers in finding resources, helping them with writing lesson plans, modeling lessons. They are the foot on the ground every day of the job I wish I had time to do, but I do not have the ability to get in the schools the way that they do. And they are just hands-on with the teachers, and I know there are a few teachers in the audience that would say, we could not do it without them. They create our benchmarks, they disaggregate the data, they work with the teachers to make sure that they are identifying the right students for remediation, they provide them resources, they help me. They are attending and participating in a lot of our state committees. Dr. Smiley's on the VLA committee that is reviewing all the supplemental and intervention materials. Ms. Bianco is on the math committee right now. Ms. Hawkins-Weston has served and is serving on the history committee. So when new SOLs come out and they reach out for participation, we now have people that can sit in on those committees and have a voice and bring Brunswick County to the table when we have those meetings. They attend every DOE webinar or state-provided professional development so that they can bring that information directly back to our teachers. Our teachers can't attend all of those things because they won't be able to teach. So they go to those things, get the information, and bring it back. Our teachers now know what's going on at DOE every single day. Every change that's coming down the road, the new math SOLs for next year, we've already met with the teachers and integrated those into our curriculum and our pacing guides. So they are on top of everything and keeping us moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we have a presentation from the Improvement Association.